This is our FY24 budget deliberations, and there's an action item, so hopefully we'll come away with some action today. I'm calling this meeting to order July 17, 2023. The time is 2:02 p.m. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go ahead with our FY24 final budget deliberations and our Finance Director, Brandy Falcon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brandy Falcon for the record. At this point, over the summer and our various budget meetings, I've presented pretty much everything there is to present to you. So today is just for you to make final decisions on anything that has been lingering, and if there are any final points or discussions that you or one of the other electeds wish to bring up. Right now, on our preliminary summary, we're sitting at $159,000 more in revenue than expenses. That increased from our last meeting primarily due to slightly increasing the revenue from the Hayden contract. I'm going to start on the personnel summary with on-call pay. That is the main outstanding item left that needs a decision to be made on.
Okay. Bill, thoughts?
I haven't changed. I think we should provide detectives on-call pay regardless of what we're doing other places. That is at odds with, it's not uniform across the board, but neither are the responsibilities.
Okay, Bruce?
Have the directors or elected officials who are affected by this, have they had a chance to review this and give their input?
Review the proposed policy?
Yes.
No, because the board hasn't even discussed the proposed policy.
Okay.
So until that happens, we don't.
Okay. Well,
Usually.
I would propose that we put into the budget then what the electeds have requested for their own departments and the directors. And we work on a policy with the people who are affected and implement that moving forward.
Okay, so essentially, we're not saying that we're going to continue this on-call practice every year. We're going to go ahead and work on something more uniform.
Well, I think we need to have a policy. I mean, that's one of the problems is that I keep noticing when it comes to how are things determined, we don't have a policy.
We do have a policy. So the first part of the policy that I forwarded to you is our current policy.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem to be working, which is why we're looking at making a new policy. Is that correct?
I think it works fine.
Okay. Then what seems to be the driver behind the new policy?
Well, I think it's a philosophical disagreement. When you have a job description and the job description says you will be working on call, you choose to take that job or not take that job based on all the job description. So there are just people in the county who want to pay people more to be on call than not. And, to your point, maybe times are changing and we need to look at that and review that. But to me, especially if you volunteer for an assignment that is on call, you kind of know that. So
Yeah.
to volunteer for something or to take a job and then ask for it to be changed later, I think is where
Well, I don't disagree with the idea that, if we do something for one group, it ends up leading other groups to want to say, me too, But I think at this point, since we're at the 11th hour, I just assume approve the budget and then let's refine this out. I just haven't been here long enough for us to actually have these discussions.
Sure.
And some of this is the first I'm hearing of it, in the last few weeks.
Yep, not a problem. So you have two of the three to keep
Perfect.
what's
So I'm going to
on-call pay.
mark the on-call pay as approved. At the last meeting, you guys had asked me to work with HR and taking a look at the proposed salaries for the elected officials. I've printed out for you a summary of multiple scenarios. At the top is what is currently in the budget. It's $135,000. That's to bring the electeds' pay to market, and market as is defined in our 2022 wage study. Then in yellow, I have the scenarios provided for doing the electeds' pay as a percentage of Canyon County's elected official pay for FY23. And then lastly, we have scenarios in blue. That would be doing our elected official pay as a certain percentage of the average FY23 pay of Ada, Bonner, and Canyon. And then at the very end would be the cost to give our elected officials simply a 6% COLA and nothing else. So I know there's a lot of scenarios here. I wasn't sure which specific one you all wanted to discuss. So yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Okay, Bill?
I think that we should be on a par with the other officials in the county that have commensurate responsibilities. And that also extends that our pay should be on a par with those people in other counties who have the same responsibilities. I don't think anybody would begrudge us that. And I think if we have an appropriate pay, which would be considerably higher than what we're being paid now, we'd have a lot higher quality of candidates coming forward.
Bruce?
Well, you know, the point of my discussion is that this county doesn't have a policy. And in fact, just to kind of clear the record, last week, Commissioner Duncan, you mentioned that we do have a policy, but that policy, according to compensation item number 120, explicitly excludes elected officials. So that's our policy for employees. There is no policy for elected officials. In fact, I polled 4 elected officials over the weekend, and none of them are aware of any policy related to, how pay is determined. And so I think what's important is that, one, we should have a policy. We should have a policy that includes what triggers reviewing elected officials' pay, what the methodology is for determining that pay, and then 3, what has to occur in order for us to implement that pay. And that way we can be looking at something and the other elected officials can at least count on a methodology moving forward. Now, I have heard the argument about public service, and I understand, and it's an abstract term. I believe that if you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different definitions. The definition to me is the one that President Trump used, which was $1 or $10 a year. That to me is public service. Public service can be looked at a lot of different ways. Yes, we do know what the salary is when we go in, and then opens the question of, well, do we not vote for a salary increase, or do we not accept a salary increase? Because there's a difference between voting for a salary increase and voting for and then accepting it. But in the end, what I think is most important is that we just have a good policy. We have a lot of other good electeds that work for this county, and I think as a board, because it's our responsibility that they must be beholden to, that we have a good policy. It's based on something, whatever that may be, and then we implement that policy.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion for the policy today?
Well, I agree with Commissioner Brooks in the sense that it should be comparable to other counties, preferably Idaho counties, because Spokane and Washington State are just very different. I learned just a few days ago that the Spokane County Sheriff is not responsible for the jail, which is surprising, and the clerk's jobs actually have been separated into 2 people's jobs. They have 5 commissioners, they have a county CEO. I mean, it's just really an apples to oranges comparison. But the reality is that what other counties are paying their elected officials are the service, salaries. I can tell you, when I look at some of these salaries, working for a private sector, I made a lot more for the kind of responsibility, a lot more. And forget about owning your own business. I'm just talking about working, getting a W-2 paycheck. So I would argue that we should be somewhere that's comparable to the same level of responsibility and the same positions.
So in this document, where do you land?
Well, that's the problem, is that if you look at the, I believe the green numbers here that we're looking at were from a previous wage study, right? And they include Spokane. So I could make the argument that it doesn't make sense to include Spokane elected officials' pay because their responsibilities are just so different. If you go down to on the next page where you have Ada, Bonner, and Canyon, at one point Ada used I believe a civilian council to determine their pay, and then that ended. You've got Ada's coroner that does their own autopsies, very different. You've got Bonner, which I have no idea how they determine their pay. I was told, I don't know if it's going to happen, a 10% increase, and then, of course, Canyon. I personally like Canyon as a good representative of the same, roughly the same amount of employee positions, and roughly the same responsibility among the different electeds. So I would argue that a policy be built around something that is as close to a comparison as Kootenai County is compared to, putting together some sort of an average. Because even this year, I believe Ada County's prosecutor is going to go up to just under 200,000. I mean, it's just a much bigger county operation than what we have. And so I could argue any one of those. And if someone wanted to argue one side, I would take the other side of the argument. But in the end, I'd be leaning more towards the Canyon County, at least one for this year. And again, it's another one of those issues that we shouldn't try to decide this right now at this point in time. But it's certainly something I think we should make it a point to discuss and kind of memorialize in writing for the county.
Okay, so 98% to 95%, where do you fall in there?
I'm more inclined to go along the 97%, and the main reason for that is because, one, this is FY23, and the word is that Canyon is probably going to be looking at a 3% bump this year. So we're going to be probably in the 5 to 6% behind them, even though the number of positions are less than what we have right now in Kootenai County. And I think that that's reasonable and fair for the electeds. If there is a discussion among the board here that we should take less, I'm happy to entertain that, and we can go down the public service route. But I think as far as the other electeds go, we should definitely put them at a market rate for public service work that's comparable responsibility-wise.
Okay, Bill?
I agree with everything you've said, and I think the idea that we have a policy gets around commissioners in this case who go, oh, if I do that, my opponents will use it against me. If you're not worth that much, you probably shouldn't be running. And that's the way I feel. I mean, it's you don't walk in here and interview and sit down in the chair. It's a lot more involved and a lot more expensive than that. And I wouldn't ask anybody to pick up what it costs to run the 2 campaigns I've been in, because you wouldn't believe it. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And when you get a good quality candidate to agree to run for Board of Commissioner, I'll just use that as an example, that to me is the public service right there, because you take a lot of crap. And you do. As sheriff, I mean, it's, the sheriff, his wife, the kids, they're all put through it. And you have to, I believe, you have to take that into consideration when you pay.
Okay, so is that a second for Bruce's 97% of Canyon County?
Sure.
Okay, you've got direction.
Okay, I will add that to the budget. That'll be about a $40,000 increase, so we'll have about 120,000 left in revenues. As far as a budget goes, I think the sheriff's office had a request that they wanted to bring forward.
Yes, we'd like the board to review our undersheriff's salary. Is that, can we make that request of the clerk's office?
Speak up a little bit. I can't.
Can we make the request of can the commissioners make the request of the clerk's office to review the undersheriff's salary?
What is the difference between what's in the budget now and what you're proposing?
So
I think Brandy.
they had wanted, so the undersheriff position, and Sylvia can speak up if I misrepresent. That position has always just been at a set annual amount. It's never been on a step plan like the rest of the chief deputies. And so the request from the sheriff's office to myself and HR was to put together a 3-year matrix for that position. The first step would be a certain percentage above the top step of a captain, as to keep that position a certain percentage above captains. And then the steps after that were a 2% increase. So if that 3-year matrix were to be implemented, it'd be about a $9,000 increase over what has already been budgeted. I hope that made sense.
And is there, because I just see that there's not really steps, it's just minimum, market, and maximum. So,
I think, Commissioner, above that, you'll see step 1, 2, and 3.
oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So, is there any kind of metric to measure, or the undersheriff would be outside of all other policy and he would just get steps, or she would just get steps each year until they maxed out?
The undersheriff checks in with the sheriff on a daily basis to see how his performance, his or her performance is, and that's the matrix that we would follow. So, but there's no set matrix. It's an at-will position, generally require at a higher risk to the employee.
Bill, thoughts?
I want to pay the undersheriff as much as we can, because I know he does a majority of work over there. Come on, it's a joke.
I'm laughing.
Okay, I don't hear it. I know he works awfully hard, and to have a undersheriff who really has your back and knows what he's doing and can at any time step in and take over, what's that worth?
I agree. This sheriff and this undersheriff, we don't have businesses that take us away from providing service to the residents of Kootenai County.
All right, so you're in favor of the 3 steps with no metrics.
Yes.
Bruce?
Couple of questions. Is this pay rate using these steps, is it commensurate with responsibilities for that position?
Yes.
And what was kind of used to determine that? If you,
We took the captain's pay when the patrol matrix was approved. It obviously moved the captains up. So then in a quasi-military organization, generally we see more responsibility with more rank. The undersheriff is the day-to-day manager of the organization, from a jail side to the patrol side to our driver's license side to all of our professional staff side. He is the day-to-day manager, and we just put that position a couple of percentage points above captain with no longevity or pay.
yeah, and just out of curiosity, was any evaluation done with other SOs that were, similarly sized or other parts of the state?
Not verbatim,
Yeah,
but it is consistent with other undersheriffs in Idaho.
yeah, okay. Well, I've mentioned this before, we have to take care of the people first. And then after that, we can demand everything we should be able to demand from them to do good work. And there should be someone waiting, hopefully, to replace someone who doesn't do good work until we can get good people that do good work. And that's been my experience personally in the business world, so I'm okay with that. Just to kind of keep things a little more in line. And it peaks out at step 3, is that correct?
Correct.
No matter how many years? Okay.
One more thing. When I was at my last job in Anchorage, I ran a hospital. And we tried to be, it's kind of afraid to say we want to be at the top of the market. We wanted to pay at the top of the market because we had Humana in there and Providence. And we were a good hour drive from Anchorage. So we tried to be at the top of the market. And I was talking to another administrator, said, why do you want to do that? And I said, because when we hire John Doe or Mary Doe for that position, they know that there are 5 or 6 people waiting for that job if they don't do a good job. So if you're going to increase pay, you have to increase expectations. And I have no problem with that.
All right, so it sounds like 2 out of 3, or a majority of commissioners are in favor of adding that to the budget. Any final thoughts?
I just have one, not talking specific people, just talking positions. If the undersheriff were to do something that a normal deputy would get suspended for, would you, as the sheriff, consider replacing the undersheriff, or how would you handle that?
Well, we believe that every member of the organization is responsible and accountable to our policies. So it doesn't matter what rank that the individual possesses.
Thank you. And just for the record, I have zero reason to believe that you would do anything. But I just had to ask the question. Okay, next.
So I'm going to mark that down as being added to the budget. That is the only open items that I had for A budget. As far as B and C budget, I don't have any open items at this point. It's just, is there something left that you wish to discuss cutting or adding to the budget?
I actually have a couple of things still with A budget. Well, I guess just one thing with A budget. So the backup documentation, the metrics for the new
For the
sheriff's
new sworn
matrix.
matrix.
I don't have anything in front of me, so it's hard to approve something without, the basis. Now, what we can do is we can say we're okay with the money, and then, but the metrics still need to be run through legal and still need to be approved by this board. So to get us down the road, I think that would be an acceptable path forward. Bruce?
Just have legal review everything, basically.
Well, I haven't seen the new stuff. The stuff they presented to me last week was not acceptable at all. So I don't have anything new today. And, it's...
I'm sorry, maybe I just wasn't following you completely. Could you kind of say that again differently?
All right, so we have a new 5-step matrix. So what are the certifications that allows somebody to move through the steps?
Oh, you're talking about for the sheriff's office?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
all right.
just for that, just for the new matrix. And so what was presented had one particular flaw, and then I had actually presented something else to the undersheriff this morning, which he didn't take me up on it, which is fine. We can still, have discussions on that. But I have nothing. I'm being asked to approve this new 5-year matrix without any backup to say, okay, if they do this or if they do that, it'll move them through.
Yeah, I think at the very least, conceptually, we should have something from the sheriff's office that just kind of...
If I may, on June the 28th at 14:02 PM, we did send over those set of measurables. And we are in the process, we are in receipt of your email today about wanting to change it. But we did submit these on June the 28th.
Yeah,
We're willing to work with you to come up with a measurable that we can both live with.
That would be, I would appreciate that, because one of the items in there goes directly against Kootenai County policy, so I'd like to make sure that we address that for sure.
And I think we did earlier
Commissioner,
today.
that's correct. The latest rendition, or revised copy, was sent to Sylvia
Okay,
at midday for her review, and it
Okay.
included the revision that we spoke specifically about after the last meeting,
okay.
and it
That's
brought us in line with county policy.
perfect, thank you. That was one of my things, and, you know. Well, I don't think that we need to approve that part of it today. I think we can just approve the funds and then come back with, you know, approving what that document.
Yeah,
ends up being.
absolutely. I wouldn't want this to occur unless we approved it, so, you know,
Okay.
I think we're all on board with that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be fair to have that document presented for approval at the August 1st meeting?
Yeah, I'm sure we could work
Sheriff's
something
Office,
out
August
between
1st,
now
to
and then.
present that to the board? Just thinking through from a payroll perspective, we need to have that nailed down before the budget is adopted, because we need, and for fairness to employees, deputies need to know if they're gonna have to meet certain parameters before the fiscal year starts to get
Sure.
their steps. So just for payroll and staff, everyone's benefit, if we could have that by August 1st, that would be helpful.
Just saying, we're gonna get a look at that too, right?
That's correct. I
Yeah.
simply sent it to Sylvia for her review because we were working
Okay.
with the county policy that was noted, and we will forward it to the
Okay.
commissioners for their review.
Perfect.
Let's not be so ambitious to say this week, but maybe next week.
Fair enough, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything else from A budget that you all wanted to discuss?
Let me see here. I think everything else is B and C for me. Anything else for you,
No,
Bruce?
no.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, B and C budget. Any items you want to discuss cutting or adding?
Well, there is one request, and I just, because my notes were left upstairs Friday, there is a team building for about $10,000 in one of the elected officials' budgets, and I don't know that I'm comfortable going down that path. I team build with my particular department heads on my own dime, which I'm not necessarily saying that everybody's got to follow that, but I would be concerned that it's $10,000 is kind of a lot of money to spend doing that, so I just wanted to bring that up for thoughts.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of that much money being spent on team building. That's what we hire heads of departments to do. And we expect elected officials and people like that to build teams. And it's kind of a given. So to write a check, I mean, how many departments could do that? It could get way out of hand.
Sure.
So I am not in favor of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree in the sense that, you know, a department head, a senior manager, you know, they should be attempting to do these things on their own. And if that doesn't seem to work, then I would definitely be open to the idea of somebody being from outside the organization. But even that, just again, my personal experience on these things is that the real team building comes from the top down. And it's a culture within the organization. So, but I tend to agree. I'd like to see it exhausted from internally before we start spending money externally.
Okay, so that is 10,000 that you're referring to is the assessor's request for a team building consultant, and the 10,000 is being split between their budgets in Fund 46 and Fund 10. So it sounds like all three of you would like to cut that from the budget.
This year,
Yes, for FY24. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and mark that down as a cut that I will make.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yes, Coeur d'Alene Economic Development. Did we come to a final, it sounds like we have $100,000 left.
Yeah, that's too little, in my opinion, for a buffer at this point. We didn't have them in there, and so.
That's totally fine. All right, Museum of North Idaho is still funded at $20,000.
Now, this is one, if I could, if it's okay. From my understanding, they actually perform an archiving service for the county. Is that something that was brought to my attention from old documents? They maintain them for the county, which is a service. So I'm not so sure that I would want to, just cut them out completely. But certainly, I think that we should have a little larger margin, given the size of this budget, for any mid-year changes and things like that. Did you want to say something, Jill?
Jill Smith for the record. Also, we, the treasurer's office, are going to be bringing a request in front of the board. They are willing to archive all of the old treasurer's tax records, which are books that are like huge, and they need to be maintained in a place that has the right temperature, air, and not enough moisture. But that's something else that they have agreed to take on once they get into their new building. Just
Okay, for additional funds or just for what?
Just
Okay.
Yeah. So my thinking is certainly no less than 10,000 for them, and then it's just a matter of how we value that.
Yeah, we could reduce it. And
Okay.
Okay, cut that down to 10.
Some of these things, I really like to see what we're getting in a concrete way. And there's one request that I'm not even going to mention the name of the organization, but it's a lot of, blue sky. And you get like, well, what are we getting for this? Well, you just wait and see. Well, I've waited for 3 years and I haven't got anything.
Okay.
All right, my last one.
So I am marking the NIC one down to 10,000, just to be clear.
Is
Are
that
you-
what you,
I mean, I just said no less than that. I mean, it's I put that out on the table. If someone
knowing
thinks
that they're going to
more-
be providing a service, which I did not know about, then, I mean, I'm fine with keeping it at 20 unless we get additional information that says they don't need that.
I'm good for 10.
10, okay. Sounds like 2 out of 3 want 10,000, so that's what I'll do.
Is that, well, you made that offer, are you? are you-
I mean, look, I think for this year, we should have enough of a margin, given the size of the budget, that, the one thing I will say is that none of this is permanent for those other organizations. It's certainly something that we can revisit in the future. But I do believe that we should take care of the county functions first and then look at these other organizations. So 10 is fine.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So then the other last thing would be the fourth detective vehicle. So we have a fleet management committee for a reason. They have a policy that they follow. Fleet management has a KCSO rep on it. So if we are not going to abide by their suggestion and approve the 3 out of the 4 requested, then I'm not sure why we would have a fleet management at this point.
I don't know, yeah, I love the sheriff's office, fleet management. That's that policy you keep talking about, Bruce.
Yeah.
And we gotta,
No, I'm fine with it. I mean, I think we have a long lead time at this point for these vehicles. Unless the sheriff has something to say that would go against the fleet management policy and why we should make an exception.
Commissioners, Brett Nelson, Under Sheriff, for the record. That vehicle in question, I know it was the mileage and projected what it would be at. I don't have an issue with allowing that to follow the recommendations of the committee, and we'll seek it next year in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
All right, so we are cutting one of the detective vehicles out of the budget.
Right, so is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Let's see, is this the one where we move to approve the budget?
Well,
Or
we have to
move
wait, we
to-
have to wait until we get our final property tax number. So I actually don't the clerk can jump in here, but I don't need an action item today.
There are times you guys make tentative
Yeah.
motions. in the
Yeah,
past.
I would say we tentatively are sending
Subject
this to
blah,
the
blah, blah.
auditor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
well, then I move that we tentatively send this to the auditor for the FY24 final budget deliberations.
I do too. Second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. Okay. Public comment. Please be none. Okay, 2:37.
That's pretty early in the year to be doing this, isn't it?
Yes, with